2017 Kia Sportage. This is exactly what happens when you complain that all vehicles look the same. A couple weeks ago, I had the Kia K900, and I went off on this tangent about how that vehicle looks like every other car. It has no character. And then you look at vehicles like the Kia Soul and the Optima, and they have this uniqueness to them. You know that they're Kias, and now they've returned to form here with the Sportage, especially with the front end. And I know I've heard people say it looks like a SUV version of the Tiburon or a copy off the Porsche Macan. But one thing's for sure, it doesn't look like every other vehicle in its segment, and that might appeal to plenty of owners or buyers. The front end design is a more fluid or sculpted look. It has just softer lines. It's not giving you this boxy look that a lot of the SUVs are doing. From certain angles, it really can confuse you because it does look like more of a premium or sporty SUV. Coming along the side of the Sportage, you realize, okay, now it's starting to look like other SUVs. It looks more European to me here. Now, this shares the same chassis as the Hyundai Tucson, so of course they're not gonna get way too far outside the box, but overall it's a pleasing look, but you know, it's not really gonna turn any heads. The back of the Sportage is where everything works for me here. They have this low profile taillight, this wraparound design with integrated LEDs. This whole rear end looks very premium. It looks like they're trying to go more upscale here, and it works really well. I think most people are going to appreciate this overall design. And then again, we have an electronic liftgate, which you know is one of my favorite things in existence. There is a big reason why we've done so many SUVs back to back.
You're in the market for one?
No, but a lot of people are. We need to be able to tell the differences between them back to back. If you space them out, you don't remember.
Right.
Especially in this segment, you forget the day after you get out of it.
They all have one thing in common.
What?
They forgot to paint the sides and the bumpers. And actually, this one's not so bad, but...
The sides still are unpainted.
Yes, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, we talked about that, in the CX-5 video?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your distaste for that. It's like my distaste.
I think I got allergies to this plastic fumes, too.
No, this is all for purpose here. This is the sister vehicle of the Hyundai Tucson. And yes, I know it's the Tucson, okay?
Tucson sounds better, just like Sportage sounds better than
Sportage. Yeah, Sportage is wimpy. Sportage gives it that flair that they're trying to get.
That's like calling a Chevy Aveo an Aveo.
Yes, indeed. All right, so again, this is a recycling of what we see on almost every vehicle on this platform. Stamped steel, struts, no use of aluminum. Well, you do have, it appears to be an aluminum.
Torque rod.
Yep. Some basic aero panels. Do we have access to oil filter and drain cock?
Mm-hmm.
Plug?
Nope. Maybe the drain cock.
No, that's the filtry.
Yeah.
So
well, I would say maybe you could, no, it's too far up.
You know what this is?
It's a front lip.
It's
you press the button and it folds out and gives you aerodynamics.
Oh,
and it rams the air up in here.
No, I don't think so. It's actually a faux skid plate. So you feel like you're going to go off-road, but you're never going to.
Yeah, because that would...
Nothing would happen to it. So we also have, now that we've got done with the exhaust
Now that
talk,
we've learned what 1 + 1 is, it's 2.
Yeah, you've helped me do the addition here. We have a 2-piece drive shaft. There's a lot of space in here, even surprisingly. You know, this tunnel for the transmission or drive shaft, it looks like you could fit a F-250 drive shaft through that tunnel. The all-wheel drive system And this, I'm going to say this during the drive part. I would never get into a Kia or Hyundai 2-liter turbo with front-wheel drive again after driving this. It solves all the issues you have with power delivery and, you know, the dynamics of the chassis having this all-wheel drive system. I'd actually really like to see it in one of their, you know, regular cars. It works pretty well. Of course, it's unfair because, yes, the CX-5, you never felt traction loss. The RAV4 was very similar. You never felt tire slip. But this thing, you know, there's tire peel like all the time, but then again, you're sending, you know, twice the amount of torque.
Right, how much power does this have compared to those?
Yeah, I mean, you're still getting brake traction with it, but it's a nice, just very limited, just to get you off the line. Yeah, it's got all that.
Man, this thing's got some beefy sway bars in the front and the rear.
Well, this is your new generation Hyundai and Kia chassis that have been
tweaked on the Nürburgring.
Yes.
Tweaked by freaking, who did the Genesis? Lotus.
Yeah. So Lotus did not do this car.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure they learned a lot from that.
And you can tell on the ride quality. They did it. It's a really, really good dampened, really good controlled ride.
It looks easy so far to repair. But talk to me in 10 years and something like that. We'll see how much rust is on it.
See how much swearing you'll be doing then.
Well, usually the problem with working on Hyundais or Kias is the engine stuff. Like that valve cover on this, what the hell was that thing?
3.3 liter.
Yeah, the Sonata. What did I say? 21 bolts just to hold the valve cover on, and then 30 other ones just to get it off, and that's only one? Necessary. Unnecessary. I mean, necessary.
A huge thing when you're dealing with a vehicle like this, and something that not too many vehicles get right, is damping on choppy pavement. Well, what is that? It's the suspension's ability to actually absorb impacts without transmitting every single bump on the road through your seat, through your hands, to make the interior just shake. Now, there's a couple things. You can have a car that's a little bit over dampened to give you that sporty, responsive feel, but a lot of times it sacrifices the overall ride quality when you're just driving every day. So how does that relate to the Sportage? And this is actually, it's really well done in here. It feels a little bit stiffer to me than the Tucson, but it's marginal. It's not something that a normal person would pick up on. I have almost no problems with the ride quality in this vehicle at all. The first time you get into the Kia Sportage 2-liter turbo, the first thing that anybody's going to notice is this. This has so much balls for this segment. You realize how much horsepower and torque makes up for all the other deficiencies in a car, especially on a street car that you're just going from point A to point B. It's really remarkable how quickly this thing accelerates for what it is. Now we're going to take it through some of the turns and just see how this thing performs more on the edge. Brakes are good, actually, surprisingly good. What it lacks in overall damping, it makes up for it in straight line acceleration. This is a vehicle that doesn't particularly feel like it's got great body control at the extreme edge of performance. This transmission is not good at being manually operated. It's actually one of its biggest negative attributes. There's a lot of understeer here on this car at the edge. It's not as well, the body control's not there with the Sportage when you're pushing it 10/10. If you stay below that 8/10 threshold, this thing feels really good for most people. I think for the average driver, you're never going to be pushing it that hard, but it definitely starts to wash out the front end in any type of aggressive driving. Now let's talk about the negatives of this turbocharged motor. Now the thing is, the way they have it tuned is there's all the torque at the bottom end. When you're driving this vehicle on the street, they want you to feel instant acceleration, instant torque and horsepower driving every day. But the negative part is when you have all that torque down low, it feels very surgy. If you're somebody who likes to drive in the turns, or you're in a place, you know, where you have a lot of hills, mountains, canyon roads, this does not do well on steady state turns. And the reason is, when you're holding the throttle, if you give it 5% extra throttle, you give it 10%, all that boost comes on and it starts to pull the front end of the car off the road. It's the boost comes on and it just makes it it just unbalances the whole vehicle. And it's one of the big reasons why I don't like the tuning of these new eco turbo motors from Hyundai and Kia. Now, again, when you get back on a straight line, it's like, give me more of that. But in terms of like a driving experience, it favors just street driving more than anything. And again, this is kind of the problem with these new eco turbocharged cars. They want to give you everything right away, that instant gratification. But what you trade off is that linearity, that power band where it builds power smoothly to the red line. These cars don't do that anymore. The big thing here, after driving this 2-liter with an all-wheel drive system, I would have an extremely hard time going back to a car like the Optima or the Sonata with the 2-liter turbo in those cars, because it is just silly in a front-wheel drive car. There's so much torque. You get torque steer, you get just wheel peel, the steering wheels just constantly tugging, and then you get into the Sportage with all-wheel drive. All of it makes sense. It gets tied together because this vehicle can actually put the power down. You don't get any of those weird anomalies you get with front-wheel drive. So when you start to lose traction in the front, it sends it to the back. It's just a really good feeling experience to be able to put down all this torque and power. One of the biggest negative aspects of this Sportage, or actually the 2-liter setup with this 6-speed automatic, is the automatic transmission. It is just, I mean, it is ridiculous. There's no point in trying to manually control this. They give you the paddles, but it auto upshifts for you anyway. It auto downshifts, and then it cannot rev match downshifts. So if you want to pull a lower gear, like right now I want to go in a second, it like just unbalances the car. It doesn't rev match a downshift. So it's so rough, it just feels like crap. And I think that kind of holds back the entire fun of what this could be. Now, if you're just, you know, driving around town in automatic, it's going to be a non-issue. But again, having the 2-liter turbo in here gives you that extra sense of sportiness, and the transmission just kind of throws all that out the window. The all-wheel drive system here works pretty well. It doesn't work as well as what I've seen on the RAV4 and the CX-5, but that's partly because this has a hell of a lot more horsepower to deal with. This doesn't get traction all the time, but you know, what do you want? I mean, that's the thing. As you add more horsepower, there's going to be more trade-offs. Some of that wheel spin can be attributed to these all-season tires. I don't find that the all-wheel drive system is a bad thing here. It does a really good job of controlling the horsepower and putting the power down in wet and dry. It's going to be a non-issue until you really start driving this like a maniac. The next thing to talk about is heat soak. And this is actually one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of these modern turbocharged cars, these eco 4-cylinder turbo models. And what is heat soak? Well, if you look at the way that a turbo system's set up, you have exhaust gas that gets recycled. That exhaust gas goes into a compressor or a turbo. The turbo compresses that air, refeeds it into an intercooler to cool the exhaust gas because it's hot as hell. That intercooler is then passing along that air back into the intake. You get that compressed air into the engine. That's where you're getting this extra horsepower and torque. Now the thing is, Heat soak sets in when that intercooler can no longer cool the air properly. The air is too hot going back into the motor, and the result is the engine and the ECU start to pull timing, start to pull power from the car, so when you hit the throttle, you don't get as big of a surge. You lose horsepower and torque. You don't feel the same consistent power over and over again. So I could sit here and do a couple back-to-back acceleration runs, and the car's not the same after the 5th time I hit the gas. And that's one of the big things I don't particularly like specifically about this Sportage is you do lose horsepower from it. And that's because that intercooler that cools the hot air is really small. Now, for most people, you're not going to notice it, but you know, it's something I've noticed driving this car, especially as it's heated up outside. I mean, I've been in freezing most of the time, and it's been really quick. But now that it's heating up, now that I'm testing it, it's something to note. Next thing, you have these mode selections. So you have this drive mode selector where you can do sport, eco, and normal. In eco mode, you can definitely tell the difference in throttle application. The throttle pedal becomes more dead. When you push it down more, less happens. The transmission does not want to downshift. And I find that for most driving, this is my favorite mode. And it's my favorite mode for one reason. I find that the programming for the throttle is ridiculous on here. So if you're in normal or sport, well, normal mode, let's talk about that. When you're in normal mode, if you press the gas pedal down 15%, 30%, or 50%, it does the same thing. It downshifts, it gives you all this power. It feels like most of the time you're pushing your foot all the way down. It's not a progressive throttle pedal. So it's really annoying because if I just want to go on the gas a little bit, it's giving me this surge of power right away that I don't particularly want. If I'm going on at 50%, it feels like I'm going full throttle. I would like the tuning or the programming of the gas pedal to be real and not be like a video game. Other things to note here are really just subtleties. One thing I really like about the Sportage is it has HID headlights. They don't have LED headlamps here. So you have HID low and high beams. And the cool thing is it's got a great color temperature. My guess is it's around 4,000 K. And it looks in between a halogen and in between an LED, and you get really good visibility with them in great color uniformity. One of my favorite things about nighttime driving. It also has LED driving lights, which you can see are super cool. It doesn't match up to the HIDs. I generally just turn them off because the headlight visibility is so good. When I squiggled my way into the new 2017 Kia Sportage, the first thing I realized, especially for the price of this vehicle compared to the other ones I've been in recently, you get a lot for your money here. I said this about the K900. Kia is big on value adding their way into people's homes. And this is no different. You have heated and cooled seats. You have a heated steering wheel. You have crash mitigation, blind spot monitoring, radar cruise control. You have an electric liftgate, this huge panoramic moonroof. I mean, everything that you could possibly want and expect in something about $10,000 more than this is here. So what happens when you get back from the test drive at the dealership? You know, Bruce looks over at you and says, you know what, honey? I really like all the features. But the reality is what happens when all of that wears off and you have to live with this? And that's actually one of the big negatives about this vehicle is because this interior feels very cheap. There's hard plastics everywhere, from the upper material with this pseudo-fake stitching, to the center console, to the door plastics. It all is very, very hard and just very budget looking, bottom line. You don't have padding at the knee areas for the passenger or the driver. The next big negative is the overuse of this piano gloss black plastics in super high traffic areas, such as your armrest for the doors. And then the worst spot is the center stack. This is where all the buttons and knobs are, where you're gonna be changing and touching this. And if you're a female and you got claws and you just got your manicure done, you're gonna scratch the hell out of this black plastic. It is just a fingerprint magnet, a dust magnet. It's just not the right material to put here. The next negative aspect is this center stack and all the controls. It's not that they're not ergonomic. They're simple to use and it's easily laid out. It's accessible. And there's no gimmicks. But here's the problem. It looks like they just threw every single button for the entire vehicle within 6 inches of each other. All these buttons are right here, and it's just, you're inundated with all of them. It seems like they just really ran out of ideas on where to put all this stuff, including the seat heaters and coolers and the steering wheel control. This looks like this is probably just Velcroed down here. It's just ridiculous. Now, there are some really good things about this interior. The seats are super comfortable. You have good adjustability here. Of course, you have cooling and heating. Your rear legroom and your overall interior space for passengers is excellent. I mean, it does not feel cramped in here. It feels like a much bigger vehicle than it is. And then the overall cargo capacity in the back is surprisingly good. You have reclining rear seats. You actually have a tray in the back that you can kind of lower to another level to get extra space, which is, I don't know why it's just not lowered to begin with, but it gives you that option of a flat floor or lower it a little bit, which is really nice. The other thing to note about the back hatch here is I can actually fit my 42-inch slider fully sideways in the back. That's something I haven't been able to do in the RAV4 or the CX-5, which is a huge bonus. The other thing to note about the rear is, I don't know if I'm dense, but I could not find a way to fold down the seats from the hatch area. I had to go into the back seats to pull the lever to fold them down, and I don't know if that's just a compromise design to get the rear seats to recline or really what it is, but if you know how to do it, I couldn't figure it out looking at it for 10 minutes. Last but not least, the infotainment. Now, this has become the standardized interface and just everything that you're seeing in all the new Kias and Hyundais now. And the good thing is the screen quality has gotten so good on the newer models. The fonts are clear, the text is clear, it looks good in bright and dark. It's much better than the competition in terms of screen quality. The speed is getting better, but there's still some lag when you go through the menus. It's not totally optimized for touch scrolling and all that. You can see there's definite just choppiness compared to what you're used to on a smartphone. And that's really one of the bigger negatives about it. The second thing is sound quality. This has this Harman Kardon sound system in here, which I find in this vehicle specifically is really good. It's got just enough bass, it's got enough treble when you can tweak your EQ for mid and high. It sounds really good. Navigation mapping is pretty good overall. I would say, again, this interface, if they could figure out the speed, this would be one of the better systems. But for right now, I'm going to consider it average. But for most people, man, it's going to do you good. So the Sportage has a lot of compromises. But if you're one of those people that really just wants a lot for your money, that wants a comfortable vehicle that is loaded with features, has a lot of technology, has a really good sound system, ergonomics, space, storage, utility, that's all here. It's really hard to argue that compared to the competitors. So if you're a little bit more fickle, like I am, you want just better ergonomics, better layout, better interior quality, well, obviously this isn't going to be for you. But that's the good thing. You do have choices. This gives you a little bit of character on the outside too. It doesn't look like everything else for the most part. And that's a big pro.